All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Professional Brotherhood podcast. What's going on, Kara? How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing very well, thank you. Cool episode for everybody tonight, I think. This one's going to take me back a few years because we have a former fellow firefighter of mine from back in my early days of firefighting. I want to welcome Chief Thad Mapledoram. Hey, what's up, Thad?
Hey, good evening. How you doing?
Awesome. How are you doing tonight?
I'm here, living the dream.
So I want to just kind of give everybody just a little backstory here as to why I brought Thad on. So those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, know that I've been doing this for a few years. I joined the volunteers in 1990, a combination department here in Monticello, New York. Thad joined the same department a few years later, 7 years later, 1997, and we got to spend some time fighting some fire together. But he took a bit of a different course to his now career job, and I'm going to let him kind of talk about all of that as we go on. But this is just a cool kind of flashback episode for me, because if you listen to the episode with Joe, and I don't remember what episode, do you remember what number that was, Kara? Because I don't.
I don't remember the number. It was
two or three ago, right?
Yeah, two or three episodes ago. Joe McLaughlin.
Okay. I made mention of different avenues to pursue firefighting as a career, and I made reference to a gentleman who had just become chief not too long ago, who I have followed his career and kind of lived a little vicariously through all the beautiful places in the world that he has visited, and that is Thad. So Thad, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. My name is Thad Mapledoram. I am the fire chief at United States Coast Guard Base, Air Station, Sector Field Office, Port Angeles, Washington. I have over 20 years on the job, and I've been living all over the world as a federal civilian firefighter. I started out back in 1997. Like Brian said, I actually grew up pretty much born and raised in the Monticello Fire Department. My dad was a career paid firefighter for 23 years there. So back in the early 80s, it was not uncommon for, if your dad was a fireman, the school bus dropped you off at the firehouse, and you hung out with the guys, and if there was a call or something, sometimes you may or may not have gone on. So
Yeah,
it's
sure.
it really was. I can't tell you how many times as a kid I remember being told, just stay in the truck, don't get out. Okay.
Yeah.
So today you go to jail for that. But
right.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome. And firefighting's been coursing through my veins my entire life. My grandfather was a volunteer, and there's a long legacy at Monticello Fire Department of my family in the volunteer service. And as soon as I got the opportunity in 1997, I joined as a junior probationary firefighter. When I did that, I absolutely fell in love with it. Absolutely. I couldn't get enough. Every minute I was awake, all I kept thinking about was firefighting. How do I get to the firehouse? How can I, how can I spend more time? How can I get more training? And the beautiful part about Monticello, 1997, we were rocking and rolling between the career guys and between the volunteers like Brian. We had New York State fire instructors, and everyone was super motivated. No one ever turned you away from the firehouse. Yeah. It was always open. It was always, a welcome avenue. Come on in, get a soda, hang out. You want to go check out tools and equipment. You want to go practice doing something. Somebody's always there to show you. And it was a great beginning to my career. I was doing volunteer firefighting. And then at the end of my high school years, I had to figure out what was I going to do for a living. Yeah. And I definitely wanted to go the firefighting route, but also I had a deep drive within myself that I always wanted to serve in the United States military. And fortunately for me, those two roads were able to cross paths with an enlistment in the United States Air Force with fire protection. I left in January of 2000, and I served just a little under 6 years in the United States Air Force. I didn't have what you would refer to as a typical career in the Air Force, because most guys at the time would get to go to one base. You know, they would go to basic training, they would go to the fire academy, and then they would go to one base for 4 years, serve out their time, and then they'd figure out what they were going to do, re-enlist, or were they going to, pursue firefighting in the outside.
Right.
I was very, very fortunate. There was a lot of crazy events that had happened during my time. You know, I joined in early 2000. It was peacetime. I spent, I went to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and I did my basic training. Then I went to Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas, San Angelo, Texas, and I did the fire academy. After that, I got stationed at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And a year later, 9/11 happened.
Right.
So things got really crazy. We immediately were on lockdown, and everybody was just getting ready to deploy, and we didn't know where we were going. We just knew, like, let's go.
Right.
And my eagerness to just get in the fight or do whatever I could do to help, I took a voluntary assignment to Korea, to Osan Air Base, South Korea. So I was in Alabama for 2 years. It was a great time. It was air education and training base. So it was just a lot of training, a lot of, learning on the job. What do you need to do every day to set yourself up for success? So when the alarm goes off, you do not hesitate. You know exactly what you're doing, and everyone knows their job.
Right.
And it was the best 2 years. And then from there, every time I was on leave, I would come home and volunteer at the Monticello Fire Department.
Yep.
And they were so busy that, here I am, I'm a firefighter in the Air Force, career firefighter, but I wasn't getting a lot of calls. I would go on leave for 2 weeks to Monticello, and I'm running 10 or 11 real calls, a structure fire, a ton of MVAs, medical calls, So it was really good that those two paths met, because it kept me motivated in my career. And then I went to Korea. I was in Korea for a year. Korea was absolutely crazy. We had an A-10 crash. We had an F-16 crash. We had a U-2, which is a priority bird, exploded. We had a ton of fires. We had an arsonist that year. It was just, if you name it, whatever could go wrong for fire protection that year, it was either burning or falling out of the sky. But the camaraderie there was astronomical, and I made friends there for life. And a lot of them are actually fire chiefs today as well.
Oh, okay.
And then after Korea, I got an assignment to RAF Mildenhall in England, and got to live in England for 2 years. While I was there, we had went into Iraq, so now we were in 2 armed conflicts. And then from there, I was just traveling all over Europe, small TDYs here and there to support missions. And I got to go to Germany, Spain. You want to talk about how crazy a career could get and avenues no one ever thinks about. Here I am. I'm 22 years old. I'm a staff sergeant now. I'm living in England. And all of a sudden, these 2 guys show up and they say, "Hey, we're here to teach you space shuttle firefighting today." What? Okay, this is cool.
Right.
So here they are. They're going over all this stuff, which I didn't even know that was a thing. And we get trained on, how would we extricate, the astronauts, and, how would you cut into the fuselage or make entry, and what are some of the, emergency factors you have to watch out for. And then boom, they put us on a team, and they have us go to Morón, Spain, and we're doing a standby for the very last space shuttle mission.
Wow.
So it's crazy where your career could go. And I had an absolute amazing time in the Air Force. And then I just came to the realization that, hey, it's been fun. I made rank. I met a lot of great people, friends for life. But my original goal was I wanted to move back to New York, and I originally wanted to go FDNY. That was my goal. So I then got out of the military, and I moved back to Monticello, New York, and
Yep.
I continued volunteer firefighting with Monticello, keeping busy,
Yep.
and everything was good. I got my real estate license while I was in between jobs at the time, and I applied for West Point Military Academy as a civilian firefighter, and it took 6 months to get on the job there. And in the interim, I didn't even know if I was getting the job. So I started talking to the career guys at Monticello about getting on the job there. And what would I have to do? Take the test and, all
Sure.
that.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I'm literally at Monticello Fire Department. I'm having a conversation with career firefighter Carl Hellman at the time, who I
Mhm.
consider a great mentor. And we were having this deep conversation about how would I go down the road to be a career there, and I get the phone call for West Point. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
like, all right, cool, yeah. In the interim, FDNY, they only gave the test every 3 years.
Right. Back
So
then, it
I
was
was,
definitely more spread out than it is now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So I took the job at West Point, and still my goal was to do FDNY.
Hmm.
And I'm at West Point. West Point was absolutely phenomenal. They are a great organization. It's one of the oldest DoD fire departments, local F7, IFF. Fantastic 3-station department. And you get to live and work in history all day, every day.
Yeah. For
I
sure.
I put in a year there, and then I took the test for FDNY, and I scored a 99.5, and I was going to be in the first class to go. And that took some time, even going through the physicals and everything else. It still took like 2 years or 3 years. And there's a thing in the military where if you're a federal employee, you can buy back your military time and it counts towards retirement. So here I am, I'm making 80 grand a year at West Point. At FDNY, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to take a huge pay cut, but I don't care because it's about the job, not the money.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they came out and they said that the test was, there was a racist factor to the test. They didn't distribute, that they were going to do the test in the low income parts of the city. They just had advertised up, and that ended up going to the Supreme Court. It took like 3 years.
Wow.
So they then came down and they ultimately ruled that yes, it was bogus. Throw out the test. They're going to have to administer a new test.
Oof.
And that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
So at that point, I had years on the job at West Point, and when you tally all my time, I think I had 8 years in total towards retirement.
Mhm.
By the time they had even given another test for FDNY, I just said, forget it. I'm too vested in the federal system at this time. I was loving my job at West Point, loving the career. So I closed that chapter of my life, FDNY, and that's when I went all in and committed to the Department of Defense and working as a federal civilian.
All right. So
So that
I
that
want to
was pretty
halt.
crazy.
I want to halt your story there because you've got a whole bunch of other stops after this. I know, but
Oh yeah.
so yeah, I know, and some good ones. But so I want to just kind of rewind a little bit, all right? Because one of the things that I've mentioned in several places before, here on the podcast, and when I'm out teaching at times, different avenues for those that may be looking to make a career out of this job, and everything. I'm sure people that are listening for the first time, listening to your story for the first time, or some of them are like, holy shit, I didn't even know this was like a path you could take.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
but I want to rewind back to like the early years, like the early volunteer years, because so you're a third generation, right? Third generation firefighter. Okay.
Yep.
Something that I tell people often is, being a volunteer, again, depending on where you were, but like you said, being a volunteer in Monticello in the 90s, it was a busy time, right?
Oh yeah.
And and I still have conversations with people today. I look at that time in my volunteer career as an extremely fortunate time for me, because it gave me a lot of experience, like, real hands-on experience that
Absolutely.
you might not typically get in the volunteer service, right?
Correct.
And we all know, here in 2020 that fires are trending down, everything else is trending up,
Yep.
and we just don't fight as much fire as we used to. So
Absolutely.
so when people say to me, well, how'd you get all this experience? I'm like, well, I kind of got lucky because, my first 10 years in the fire service, it was busy.
Yeah. Monticello was busy.
Yeah, and we fought a lot of fire.
Yep.
But and the other thing that I some people will find is unique, because I know we have listeners from the career side, from the volunteer side, from the combination side, and Kara she'll jump in here a little bit, as I'm sure as well on this one. Those relationships, depending on where you are, aren't always good when it comes to
Absolutely.
career volunteer. And
Absolutely.
and the one thing I can say is, back in those days when your dad was working and the guys that he was working with, I say it all the time, you did not know the difference. Like, I could walk into the firehouse, sit on the couch, watch TV with the guy that was working, and if a job came in, we got on the truck, we went out to the job. You didn't know. The only reason you knew one guy was getting paid and the other guy wasn't getting paid was because the guy getting paid was wearing a uniform.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
you just didn't know the difference. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's agencies that still have that today, but that career volunteer divide isn't always good in some areas.
Yeah. Well, I remember very distinctly, when I had started working at West Point, the guys were asking me where I was from. And when I told them Monticello, their ears perked up, and I didn't know why. And they knew that Monticello was a combi department.
Mm-hmm.
And they said to me, hey, you realize that you're a union member now. You are IFF, local F7. I was like, yeah. They were like, they're IFF. You cannot scab and go be a volunteer at another career department. You're taking away jobs.
Yeah.
And they were giving me so much, backlash and everything, that there was literally a point when I stopped going, because I just didn't want to go to work and hear about it,
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely out there. It's definitely out there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's very unfortunate, because we're all, the message at the end of the day is, we want to go out and we want to save lives. And when we want to help people in their time of need, it's crazy some of the politics that get involved.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kara, I see your wheels turning. Jump in.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because in my personal experience, I work alongside with several mutual aid departments that are combi and even straight paid in my area, and I haven't experienced that end of it much personally. However, I do notice on social media that there is a huge amount of backlash and battling between volunteer and career. And it's surprising to me. And I think part of it that I think is interesting is that the notion that volunteer is taking somebody else's job. And I don't know how it is. I don't claim to know how every department works across the country and how all states and counties and parishes, or however they're split up, work. But, like you said, in New York State, those tests are only given maybe once every 4 years, once every 3 years, whatever. And there's only X amount of money that's going to be allotted to those career folks, no matter how you slice it. There's only going to be X amount of jobs that are going to be posted for career slots. So the notion that a volunteer is taking that from somebody else, I think, is really misplaced.
For sure.
Because it's just the fact is, that's just not the way it works.
Yeah.
And if communities could afford, and the taxpayers could afford to have, pay all their firefighters, I'm sure they'd be very willing to. But that's not the reality of the situation. You would, there's no way the tax base could survive it.
Right.
And so I think it's kind of a narrow view, honestly, of how it works, and not really well thought out as an argument. And it surprises me when I see people vehemently being opposed to volunteer firefighters.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also surprises me when I see it come from the other end, when volunteer firefighters are against people getting paid for it.
Yeah, especially when their apparatus isn't getting out the door.
Right,
Like
right.
when you're not getting your apparatus out the door at your volunteer firehouse, it's kind of a hard argument.
It's a very difficult argument to say, and if you're scratching on calls and you've got a paid department, less than 7 miles away that's making all your runs for you.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, especially in today's day and age, we need unity more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
More than anything else at a base, we need to be unified as firemen in the service that we provide.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Sure. So, back in the times we're talking about in the 90s, I mean, I took the Fdny exam a few years prior to you. Actually, four of us went down and we took it together. 4 guys went down, took it on the same Saturday morning or whatever they were giving it. And you're 100% correct. Back then, it was a year till you got your written test results. Then it was a year until they called you for your physical, and then it was another year until it was a long drawn out process. And of the 4 of us that took it at the time, only one of my buddies ended up going on to do it, because the rest of us, I had fallen into a job that I was doing all right at, and you kind of get in your roots. My other 2 buddies had fallen into jobs that, they were all doing all right at, and we all continued to volunteer. So, back then it's like, people can't really relate to the differences to, 20, 30 years ago. But your path, and I bring this up and I mentioned this before we got on air, is, I'll bring your situation up, or, the fact that there are other avenues for people when we're talking firefighter 1 and the subject of national certification comes up, and I'll have, kids that'll look at me and they'll be like, well, why do I want to go take another test? And I'm like, well, there's a few reasons why you want to go take another test. First of all, you're 18 years old, you're 22 years old, whatever you are, you don't know where you're going to end up. Right now you think you're going to continue living in Sullivan County, New York for the rest of your life. I'm like, you don't know that. You could pick up 5 years from now and move 3 states over, and they won't transfer your New York State certification. So your national certification is going to help you with that, unless you want to do this all over again in another state. I said, but then I go on to explain to them, have you ever thought about doing this for a job, for a career? Well, yeah, I've thought about it. Well, there's another reason why it's a good idea to go get your national certs, because you can find your way into some of these different federal avenues of employment, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, just New York alone, you have several DoD installations. You have West Point Military Academy, you have the VA, you have Castle Point and them, and they're all national certifications. And you even have Stewart Air National Guard Base that they're talking about converting over to federal from state now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have those national certifications, you can then have a foot in the door. You could then apply and at least get in the running. And if you don't have national, you don't have a chance. You cannot even apply.
Right.
So.
And I think, this is a great time to talk about this, being that it's Fire Prevention Week too. For a lot of the volunteer departments, as they're going out and talking to community, well, of course, now we're doing it all like this because of COVID. But, when people are going out to teach fire prevention, or even career departments, if they have a pub ed department, I like to, with the older kids, the juniors and seniors, I like to take them aside and talk to them about careers in the fire service as part of the pub ed, kind of curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
the reason I like to do that is because I like to try to get to them before they even get into firefighter one. Or into a boot camp or whatever it is, when they're starting to talk about looking at colleges and looking at jobs and job training and things like that. And in my experience locally with the schools in this area, a lot of times the guidance counselors don't even talk about the fire service
Oh no.
at all.
It's like
At all.
trade schools, you know,
Right.
how,
And they don't talk about trade schools.
right.
So, and one of the points that I make in my curriculum that I teach is that, is a big heavy push on college, and that benefits the schools, because if they have X number of kids that are going into 4-year college education programs, they get X number of funding for it. So they're motivated by those statistics. They're not necessarily looking at the kids as individuals and what their interests are and how they might be able to find a passion and a love for the job and be able to serve their community. There's been a real shift away from that kind of mentality about trades and hands-on work and skills. And I think it's really unfortunate that the schools aren't doing that, but I think it provides the fire departments with an opportunity to step in and teach that and talk about, you can get scholarships from different fire organizations like Fdny scholarships and things like that. You can follow a path to get your national cert so that you can go anywhere if you don't want to stay in the area. And if you're looking at going to college, that's great. But if you don't know what you want to do for college, I mean, like my line that I use is like, you have a bachelor's in psychology, then what you're going to hear from me is I'll have a venti latte. Because what are you doing with that? Nothing.
Yeah.
You're not
Right.
doing anything with that.
Right.
You've spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a bachelor's in psychology. And then you're serving coffee at Starbucks, which is a noble profession. I love Starbucks.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. So I think that fire departments have a huge opportunity to talk about that career path and teach kids at those turning points when you're juniors and seniors looking at careers, how to get there and what to do, and talk to them about, EMS and paramedic too, because now a lot of departments have, paramedic as a minimum.
Yes.
Well,
And I love that.
yeah. And one other thing, that you make a really good point is, and this is kind of the reason why I wanted to do this, is because, if I didn't have experience with guys like Tad and some of the other guys that I knew that, worked at Stewart Air Base or worked at West Point, I, even being a firefighter for as many years as I have been, I would have no clue that these other avenues are there. No clue whatsoever. I know at least a half a dozen guys that have been career firefighters at the airbase, and one of them's one of my commissioners now. He's a retired assistant chief there, spent his entire career there, but
Yeah.
you would never know. You just wouldn't know, and that goes for firefighters too. When you think of the military, this is not what you think of. You don't think of this path,
Correct.
You definitely don't, so I think it's important information to get out and to discuss. And that's why I was, excited about doing this. Let's keep going. So now, you're back in the States. You're back in the States. You're at West Point. Okay.
I'm at West Point, running and gunning. Things are great. And they have a lot of, smells and bells on campus. A lot of their fires come mutual aid here and there into the Highland Falls or city of Newburgh. And lot of great medical calls. Some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen in my life, unfortunately, happened there, but we were there and saved a lot of lives.
Right.
West Point is located on the side of a mountain, so things happen. A lot of MBAs, things like that. But after 6 years there, my fire chief at the time had taken a transfer down to be the fire chief at Naval Air Station Key West. And he had basically wrote an email back and was like, "Hey guys, I love it down here. If anybody wants to come work down here, I have some openings." I saw one come open. Me and the guys are at work at West Point joking. And one of the guys says, "Oh man, Maple, you would love it. It's got the sun and the sand and everything you want. It's totally your scene. You should apply." And, kind of as a joke, I did, like, ha ha ha, how funny would it be for the chief to see my name come across his desk down there? And next thing I know, I get a job offer. No phone call, no, hey, is this a serious thing? I just
Right.
get an email from HR one day. Hey, congratulations, you've been selected. Can you be here in 2 weeks? And I'm like, what? So, I thought about it, and I said, I'm young. What do I have to lose? I wasn't married at the time, or no kids. I had
Yeah,
no
no
anchors,
ties, right? Yeah.
no ties. So, I talked to my parents about it. I said, hey, I'm going to go down to Florida. And my dad, who has always been a huge advocate to, get out there and see the world and, live your life. He's like, do it, go out there. It's beautiful. It's, an island. So I took a job down there, and Key West honestly surprised me. When you go down to a place like that, as soon as I got there, one of the old timers pulls me aside and he's like, hey, you're coming from New York, and, I could see, you're very ambitious. This is island life. You got to slow it down. Not a lot's going on down here. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And they're like, don't expect a lot of action. Well, in the fire service, you have white clouds and you have black clouds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I am a black cloud. It follows me everywhere I go. So I'm not in Key West 30 days, and boom, we had a C-130 land on runway 7 on fire. The crew's still inside. Yeah, I was supposed to be the third crash truck out. We jumped on the truck so fast and got out of the station. We ended up being the first truck on scene. We knocked down the fire, got the crews out, saved the aircraft, saved the crew. It ended up being a Canadian C-130, so it was even more important because now it's an international thing.
Sure, sure.
So, everybody's like, who is this guy? Because they didn't know what to expect from me. I'm brand new. I didn't even know my coworkers' names. And here I am, running to the plane, opening the door. I got the hand line. I turn around to the first guy I see, and I go, come with me. We go in, and we're doing an interior attack. And they're like, who is this guy? So as soon as, I'll never forget this, I get out of the plane, and at this time, the chief, he was outside, and he sees me. And as soon as I take off my SCBA mask, he just gives me a big thumbs up and has a huge smile on his face, like, thank you very much for not botching this one, So, yeah, no, it was great. From there, I wasn't there 6 months. I got a promotion to lieutenant, was loving it. We had some hotel fire. We had one hotel fire, and then we had, car accidents and some other things. A few F-18s with their landing gear not down, crashed on the runway and things like that. But, that's life. And
he's leaving out the best part. I just want to let everybody know, because when this guy was in Key West, I got to tell you, and watching his social media, it's great to hear all these firefighting stories now. But I didn't see much firefighting going on, on the social media feeds. There was a lot of crabbing and lobster fishing and spending time on the boat. And it seemed like every time I look at him, he's smiling with his sunglasses on, and he's out on a boat somewhere.
Gotta do something on the off days. Don't be a hater.
It looked like a good time. It looked like it was tough to handle.
Let me explain. Okay. There's a reason for this. So down there, as a federal firefighter, federal firefighters work 144 hours every 2 weeks. It's the most out of any career department. And you work 2 days on, 3 days off, 2 days on, 3 days off. So when you're at work on day one, we focus like, hey, we're here, we're ready to go to the call. Day two, we're like, all right, we've already been here for 24 hours. Now let's talk about, when we get off tomorrow, who's going to get the lobster, who's going fishing, and then who's, going to make rice, and what island are we going to go meet at 1,300 hours. And then we barbecue, and, we're playing horseshoes. The camaraderie was astronomical there. Everyone was just getting along. And if you follow me on social media, I did for a while have a wolf pack there, and there was definitely lots to look at on the feed. It was absolutely great times. I would never give up, give back that time. And that is also where I met my wife, Rachel.
Yeah.
So Key West definitely always holds a special place in my heart. And yeah, then from there, got married, and I applied and interviewed, and I got a promotion to station captain over in NSA Naples, Italy. So I'll never forget, I actually wasn't married at the time when I got offered the job. And then I turned to my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, hey, how would you feel about moving to Italy? And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, we could go to Italy and we could live there for 3 years. And she was like, oh, I could do that as your girlfriend? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah. I knew there's no way we'd have to be married. And I had actually already had the ring, and I'd already planned, like, I wanted to propose, but
Right.
you just never know when is the right time.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
this kicked me in the butt, and I was like, all right, I gotta make things happen. So I took her out, out for a beach day on a boat day. And when the sun was going down, we swung around the boat and I proposed, and she said yes. And then I surprised her and I said, hey, now that you've said yes, are you okay? I've already planned a wedding on the 4th of July, and we're going to have 30 of our closest friends and family, and we're going to get married at sunset. And she was like, yes. So
It's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it definitely was very picturesque, and again, once in a lifetime type thing. I never thought I would do something like that. I never
Mm.
thought in a million years I would be planning a wedding,
Sure.
but
Sure.
I did it. And
Yep.
then from there, I took her on a 3-year honeymoon over to Italy. So, so yeah, the career, it's been a blessing all the way around.
Hmm.
So we went to Italy December 2015, and I was there as a captain, and that was a very unique experience because the department was split 3 ways. You had your USGS civilian employees who
Hmm.
were management. Then you had your Italian civilians who made up the majority of the workforce, everything from firefighter to captain to deputy chief. And then we had active duty Navy firefighters who their normal job in the Navy is ABH, which is aviation bosun's mate handler. Basically, they're the guys that they do one of two things. They either launch the planes off the deck of an aircraft carrier like you see in Top Gun,
Right. Right.
or they're the crash crew on an aircraft carrier, and they, if there's a fire, they would go put it out.
Okay.
And they have a shore duty billet, and when they do 4 years at sea, then they can do 2 years on land. And they chose Italy, and they chose to be firefighters, so they go through the fire academy, and then they get assigned there. They
Nice.
do their time, and then after that they go back to the ship where they're not firefighters anymore, they're launching aircraft. So again, another avenue that you would
Yeah.
never think about.
No,
you
for
know
sure.
yeah, so I was there a year, and very interesting times, because it was a three-headed monster. We had to do training. So training was, you're dealing with 3 different entities, all trying to get on the same page. You're dealing with a cultural barrier because you have active duty Navy who've never been firefighters. So you're having to, really go back to the crawl, walk, run phase. You're at the
Right.
crawl again.
Right.
And then
Right.
you're mixing that in with Italians who, some speak perfect English, some speak broken English. There's a lot of translating going on. So it was definitely, a full gamut of everything, but it was an amazing experience. And I was only there a year, and then a bunch of guys had promoted and they left, and I bumped up to battalion chief, and then I was a battalion chief there for my last 2 years. And then while we were there also, we had our first son, Benito Arthur. So that was a very unique experience having a child over in Italy.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Kara, I'll have to. I'm sure I'll find them somewhere. You have to see the villa pictures from Italy. The
Yeah.
that where you were in Italy was unbelievable.
Yeah.
It was.
So we're right on the Tyrian Sea in the Mediterranean, in Naples, Italy. We lived in a town called Bacali, right next to Monte de Perogida. And when the perk and the reason why civilian federal employees go overseas is because when you go over, they pay for your house and they pay for your utilities.
Oh,
So when you go over, they just give you a capped amount of money, and they say, go find whatever house you want. Just don't
right.
go over this amount. So I found a villa on the sea. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity,
Yeah.
and we got to live that dream. Like every morning when the sun would come up, we would see downtown Naples. We would see the Amalfi Coast. We could see the island of Capri, the island of Procida, and the island of Ischia. And that was, how could you not love that every single day?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
experiences are so valuable, and so it's so great that you're telling them and sharing them with people, because I think, where else are young people going to get opportunities like that? Even here and in the United States, if you're not looking at that. And I think that people don't know about federal, firefighting and all the opportunities that it holds. And I think, learn a little bit about Navy firefighting if you study modern firematics, and where a lot of that firefighting style came from, from the Navy, and how they fought fires. But I don't think that people realize that there's a huge difference in real estate when you're looking at homes in Europe versus what you can get in like say California or Southern California. You're going to be able to live out like in your literal dream home, in Europe, in a much different kind of scope than if you're looking at homes, in some place where you're looking for that beach and sea life here in the States.
Absolutely. We lived like kings and queens, and life was just perfect. I mean, we go out to dinner every night because dinner was $20.
Yeah, right.
Know? So,
it's like the best food ever. Like you never get,
Yeah. My wife, she actually was also blessed because she's a contract specialist, and her job was in Key West, and her employer allowed her the opportunity to work from home. So she was still working remotely while we were over there. And then from there, I would just tell her all the time, hey, do me a favor. Every month when I'm at work, when you get free time, pick another country and we're going to go. And just book it. We're going to go. And that's what we did. Like every month, every other month, we just went to different countries. And even when we had our first son, Benito, by the age of 6 months, he had been to 6 countries.
Yeah,
who could say that?
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I definitely chose the right path.
Yeah.
And it's still getting better because then from there I got priority placed. There's a program in the federal system that says, hey, if you've received a promotion and you're overseas, you could either take a demotion and go back to where you came from and retain the pay, or we will place you in your current position at another location that has needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided, what was best for my career was to not go backwards, but just let's see where life puts us, and let's, go with the flow. So we got priority placed to a place called Marine Corps Logistics Base, Albany, Georgia. And very interesting place. It is
what you're used to, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no. So when I was in the Air Force and I was at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, I had gone to Atlanta a lot. And when I thought of Georgia, I thought of Atlanta. When we went to Albany, Georgia, it was in the middle of nowhere. It's where all the pecan trees are. It's just extremely country, extremely desolate. There's like nothing to do. We didn't know that, we're thinking of like Gone with the Wind. Like, oh, we're going to get this Southern mansion and, we're going to live this dream. And we got there, and 7 days into our first 7 days back in America, Hurricane Michael hits, wipes out Panama City, and comes up and wipes out our base. And I'm like, what? So,
well, you kept the black cloud.
Yeah, I definitely kept the black cloud. And then the next 30 days, it just rained and rained and rained and flooded. And then the next 30 days, there was tornadoes. And my wife just says, we got to go. And I'm like, absolutely. So I had applied for a supervisory firefighter job out at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, competed, and I got that promotion. So we packed up the family and again moved, and across the country we went. Drove across country and went out to White Sands Missile Range. Slang term for it is Wismer, if you cram all the little words together.
Mm-hmm.
And we loved it there. We absolutely loved it there. A lot of people don't know that that base ever, is in existence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's half because people just don't know about it and half because they kind of want it that way.
Right.
But basically what I can tell you is anything that comes out into the operational theater for the government, weapons wise, it's all tested there. It's all invented there, tested there. And, it's an amazing place to work. It's where we had tested the first nuclear bomb.
Wow.
And the square footage that we had to cover was insane. So we had 4 fire stations. We covered 2.3 million acres. And yeah, so it was not uncommon to have an emergency. We had a structure fire and you got 20 plus minute response times from each station.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then station 3 was a 2-hour response time.
Wow. That's crazy.
So,
yeah.
It is. So, I never in my life did I think that here I am, supervisory firefighter, and, I go to work and they're like, hey, you got it today. There's Chief 2 vehicle. You're covering 2.3 million acres. You got it. Good luck.
Good luck.
Okay,
God bless. Have fun.
yeah. You got this. So yeah, no, it was absolutely amazing experience. The guys there were phenomenal. For those who don't know, it's located in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and it borders El Paso, Texas. So we spent a lot of time in El Paso, and half, maybe more, maybe 60% of my department actually was born, raised, and lived in El Paso, Texas, and they drove to White Sands to work. White Sands Missile Range butts up to Fort Bliss, Texas.
Okay.
And it also butts up on the other side to Holloman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, New Mexico. So the square footage all the way around for the Department of Defense is ginormous.
Wow.
But yeah, absolutely great time there. We did a lot of training. I saw a lot of cool things. Anytime they're going to do an experiment on something, shoot something off, fire it, they need fire department to stand by. And you get an opportunity to go out there and see things that no one else has ever seen, or
Right.
they won't see for another 10 years. And
Sure.
you get to see it happen. So, it's an opportunity of an absolute lifetime. And then, boom, NASA's back. And where do they make their landing and alternate landing site? White Sands Missile Range.
Huh.
So, now you go back in my career to 2003, 2004. Sure. I took space shuttle firefighting class, and boom, now we have the new Boeing, spacecraft landing at White Sands Missile Range. So, everything kind of goes full circle.
Yeah, full circle. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Huh.
And so that was pretty awesome. Everything was good. And then I was there for a year. And then I decided that I wanted to apply for a fire chief's job just to get interview experience. I figured, hey, let me start applying to fire chief jobs and let me get some experience at the, senior executive level and get a feel for it. And I randomly applied for this Coast Guard job up in, the Pacific Northwest, which I had never been. And everything they were looking for was everything that I had just done. And I got hired as a fire chief at a very young age, at pretty much at 19 years on the job.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am, I get a promotion of fire chief and opportunity of a career. I was brought here to stand up a fire department. So there was many reasons why I took this career move and I didn't stay in one place too long.
Right.
It doesn't look good when you're constantly moving around.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the federal system, if you want to promote, you pretty much have to move around unless you're
Right.
going to stay at one place for 20, 30 years, and and a promotion might come your way. One thing that everyone needs to understand: in the federal system, you do not test for promotion. It is just, you have to have the certifications, you have to apply online, and then sometimes they do interview boards, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the chiefs just pick who they want.
Right.
So it's much harder, I feel, to get promoted in the federal system than it is in a municipality. Because in a municipality, a lot of them, it's, hey, the test for lieutenant's up. Everyone take the test. And if you studied and you scored highest, hey, you got it.
Right.
And,
Right.
and I
Right.
do like that. I do like that because there's no favoritism involved. There's no bias. It's just, hey, he who did best got it.
Mhm.
So, it's I've been very fortunate to promote all the way up from firefighter to fire chief. And now we're out here and beautiful Pacific Northwest, working for the Coast Guard. I'm no longer DOD, Department of Defense. Now I'm DHS, Department of Homeland Security.
Mhm.
So I'm learning all about how they operate. And it's interesting because our primary mission here is search and rescue and drug interdiction.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, I got a little bit of a taste when I was down in Key West because Coast Guard Sector Key West is butted up to our Fire Station 2 for the Navy. So
Right.
we provided fire protection for their ships and their boats and for their buildings. So I got a little bit of a taste, and I had made some coastie friends. They told me basically what they were doing. So when I got up here, I knew what the boats were doing, but I had
Mhm.
never been in an air station before. And here we have three MH-65 helicopters, and they perform search and rescue, and they go all over here. And they're plucking people off boats, out of the water, off mountains. These guys are everyday heroes. They really are. They go
Mhm.
out and they do the do. And it's our responsibility as firefighters to make sure that we are doing our job and we're here. So if they have an in-flight emergency, if they have a hard landing, if they crash, they know in the back of their mind somebody's coming to get them,
Sure.
you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
One of the
yeah.
one of the channels of Discovery, or one of them, had a series on there for a while on Coast Guard rescue operations. I don't even remember what it was called, but I'd gotten into that for a while, and it was just one of those things that I was like, wow, if I was going to rewind and do something, if I was to rewind and make a list of like cool shit to do, this would definitely be one of the things to go for, But
Yeah.
one thing I want to mention is, so, you've had a great career right to this point, but
Yep.
knowing what I know about you and the beginning of this career is one thing that you never stopped doing, and I think it's important to highlight. You just mentioned it in the last couple minutes, is training. Right? You've
Yes.
consistently trained for every position, from the day back in the day, just being a volunteer, you know
Correct.
to getting in the service, and every step of the way. We've had discussions about this before. You've consistently trained, you know throughout the years, and I think
It's
that's an important
yeah.
thing to talk about, because you wouldn't be where you are today, especially in the system you're in, if you did not continue to do that.
Correct. Being a federal firefighter, we don't have the volume of calls that municipalities have. So because we're slower, we have to train, and we do train. Every DOD, every DHS, every federal firefighter out there, VA, or everyone, we do 1 hour of training every shift. You work 12 shifts a month, you're getting 12 hours of training.
Mhm.
Plus, we do what's called crew chief proficiency training, CCPT. And that is, hey, you've done your scheduled training for the day. Hey, now take your crew out with crew continuity, and hey, why don't you do some bread and butter stuff? Pull a hand line, hit a hydrant, walk through a building and talk about intricate things that are unique to that building, that are passed down from generation to generation. You know,
Sure.
when I got to West Point is a great example. There was elevators there, but some elevators you had to climb like 7 stories, and then you had to walk across like a catwalk to get to the the mechanic room to
Right.
reset the elevator.
Right. Right.
If someone on the job did not pass that down to me and show me that, I would never know that.
Sure.
And that's where that all comes into.
Yeah.
And another thing about training that I didn't talk about, which was actually huge, and I'm still doing, is my college degree. So when I was in the military, I got the Montgomery GI Bill, Chapter 30. And when I got out, I started using it. I used it to go to real estate school, and then I used it to get some of my larger certifications: Fire Officer 3, Fire Officer 4, Fire Instructor 3, Fire Inspector 3. And then when I got to Key West, I did my associates in fire science. Then I did my bachelor's in fire science, took a few years off when I was in Italy. And then when I came back to the States, I am now completing my master's in emergency services management.
Awesome.
Thank you. I currently have 3 classes left. I'm working on finishing 1, and then I'm actually going to double up next semester on my last 2, and I'll be done with that.
Yeah.
So it is very important that you train. And it's also very important that if you want to, go further in your career, you've got to get your degree. You've got to expand your mind and open your mind. And it's important that you learn how other people view things, how other people think. And, you really hone in on your writing and your penmanship and, just how you speak, the tones of your emails, things like that.
Mhm.
It's really full circle for sure. But yeah, training, I don't care if you're a volunteer or if you're a career, the training shows on the fire ground.
Absolutely.
I've never been to a fire ground and had a bunch of guys show up, and immediately I could tell, oh, they got off the truck. They know what they're doing. They're acting as a team. They're pulling the hose. They're at the door. They're doing forcible entry. They're in. They have our back. Or a RIT team shows up. And I'm like, hey, we've done multiple training exercises with these guys on RIT. I know when they showed up, they put all the tools in the basket. They did their 360. They checked in. They got on the right tack channel. I have comfort now when I'm inside fighting fire, or I have comfort as a chief knowing that if one of my guys goes down, heaven forbid, that I have, guys who train and know what they're doing who are going to go in and protect them.
Yep.
Because when you come across career, because they're not exempt to this, when you come across career guys who don't train, that hate training, and you come across some volunteer agencies that aren't as active and they don't train, then when you watch, that's where you see those YouTube videos all online.
Yep.
And, you got guys lobbing water over a roof, not even hitting the fire, and you're like, what are you doing?
Right.
And
Right.
they're honestly in their heart doing what they feel is best and the right thing, but they just don't know any better because they're not training.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, training is definitely important.
I think you make a great point about how training can have an exponential impact on career or volunteer people, because when you're training and you're learning, you're not just learning the skills that you're working on during that training session. You're learning skills like working together as a team, learning how to overcome adversity between, personality conflicts and the people that you're working with. You're learning how to make a plan and carry the plan out. You're learning communication skills. You're learning so much more, and you're using all of that, and that carries over into other parts of your life. And so the training that we're doing as firefighters together, whether if we're volunteering, we're working at another job, those skills you can use in your other job. Those training skills you can use. And when you're talking about going on to get your education, that's extremely valuable too, because when you're a 16-year-old kid, you weren't thinking, what, I want to get a master's degree in emergency management. That's something that who knows about that? Nobody talks about that kind of stuff. But those kind of roles and jobs, that's a growth area, for people that are interested in this line of work. And you have that real world experience of being able to command a scene and being part of being commanded by somebody when you're looking at doing that kind of work on a broader spectrum. So giving younger people an opportunity to see all of the paths that they can go through, and not to say, you don't need a degree. You may find that you want to get a degree in something that you tapped on one during your service, or somebody that you met in the community that you were working with that just sparked a fire in you. those kinds of things I think are so important, and it really can't be oversold to the younger people in the community.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's why I personally, I'm a huge proponent of, people joining the United States military. Doesn't matter if it's guard, reserve, active duty. It doesn't matter what branch. Today's kids need to know, if you do that, you get what's called now the Forever GI Bill. And, my GI Bill just cut off last month because I hit 15 years out of the service, right? Today's kids, after 2013, they have it for life. They have, they have an amount of money that they could spend for, an infinite amount of time. And
Sure.
it's really amazing because, yeah, you could go into the military, you could be a firefighter and say, I absolutely hate this job. I don't want to do this. I want to go, get my aeronautical license. Okay, well, when you separate after 4 years, you can go take the GI Bill and go get your aeronautical license. Nobody is stopping you,
Right.
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 So
And I know that when we interviewed Joe McLaughlin, he came in as a junior and he has a real interest in firefighting as a career. And, he talked about, then I, want to use my educational credits and things. And I said, you're 19 years old. If you get on a department somewhere and you give them 20 years, you got a whole nother time of
correct.
career for
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Right.
You're going to be you're not going to stop working when you're 40. Like, you're just not. So,
Yeah.
if you want to be a firefighter for the first 20 years of your working years, and then you want to go do something else as a second career, related or not, you have the opportunity to do that.
Sure.
Correct. Absolutely.
It's and then you're have a pension and you have insurance and you have all these other things that are important adult things that you need to have, or you should have as an adult, ideally.
Mhm.
So I think that that's like a huge thing too. It's like it's not infinite. You don't have to do it forever and ever and ever, but if you serve in the military for this amount of time, these are the benefits that you're going to get that are going to carry you through the second part of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And listen, I don't know. I don't know how the military is approached today. I'm sure I'll learn. I mean, obviously it wasn't, my daughter didn't discuss it. She knew what she was doing, when she came out of school. But, I even remember when I was in high school a while ago, it really it wasn't discussed. These avenues weren't discussed unless you had a desire to serve, or you knew somebody or a family member that had served that kind of pushed you to a recruiter, or I mean, that was the only time it was discussed. It was never discussed with your guidance counselor, and I, who knows if it even is today, that there's so many different avenues to do things. I think typically people, when you say the military, they immediately go to like wartime and putting yourself in harm's way and being in a bad place, which could obviously happen, but it's an avenue that not many people think about when especially when we're talking about what we're talking about today, and that's firefighting.
Correct. And a funny story, I don't know if you remember this or not, but all through high school, I was getting recruited by the United States Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was supposed to go in the Navy the whole time. And they told me, oh, yeah, you're going to be a fireman. You're going to be a fireman. My dad was in the Navy. I said, okay. And my dad told me, you don't sign on that contract unless it says firefighter. Okay.
Right.
I go up to MEPS in Albany, and the guy says, oh, how about engine room mechanic? You get to hang out below deck with all the cool guys. And I'm like, no, not playing this game.
Yeah.
And he says, no, you're going to sign and you're going to do this. And I said, no, my recruiter said I'm going to be a fireman. He says, everybody in the Navy's a fireman. And
Yeah.
right there, I knew, hey, red flag, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Well, I'll never forget this as long as I live. The MEPS Center is an office that it's a square waiting room with different rooms all the way around it. And each corner has a different branch. Well, I go out into this thing with all my documents in my hand, and I said, hey, I got a great ASVAB score. I just passed my physical. I can go whenever. Who here can make me a fireman? And the Air Force recruiter in his rolling chair slides out of his office, and he's like, "I can come here." And I'm like, "Okay." I didn't know anything about the Air Force. I
Right.
go over into his office. He locks the door. The Navy recruiter's beating on the door. "You better not steal him." And the guy's like, "Hey, I can make you a fireman right now, but you can't leave till November or till January." And at the time, it was November. And I was
Right.
like, "I don't care. I just want to be a fireman." He's like, "Oh, cool. You can spend the holidays with your family, and then you could go." Man, I signed right there, and the Navy never talked to me again. The Navy recruiter was so angry. He made the guy who didn't even know me drive me all the way back to Monticello. He wouldn't even drive me home. So,
That's great.
yeah,
That's great.
yeah. It's funny how situations, they happen, and
Yeah.
you just kind
Yeah.
of go with
Yeah.
the flow.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Kara, any final questions or points you wanna make?
No, I think it's a great topic, and I think it's so important to share with fire departments so that they can, learn ways to talk to people in their community, especially the young people coming in, or their RAMs or their juniors, just to give them a little bit of a perspective and some opportunity to learn something that they might not otherwise know about. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Tad, this was awesome. I knew it would be, and our conversation with Joe kind of sparked the idea for me, and again, I've had this conversation with people countless times, just saying, hey, there's lots of paths you can take with this, and what's cool for me is like there's so many people from like our time, that time that we were active together that have gone on to do different things. You went on and you did your thing. Obviously we have guys that did go on to the FDNY. We had guys that went on to, the air base. We had guys that went on, to the Fairfax County down south, so it's always cool to just kind of talk to everybody and highlight the different avenues that are out there for, people that might want to make a career out of this someday, that are just, have it ingrained in their brain, civil service test, civil service test, civil service test. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there are other things that you could do. And, your career is definitely a good example of that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thanks for coming on and joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Thank you very much for having me. And it's been a pleasure catching up. And, anytime you want me back, just give me a call.
All right, brother. Thanks. Stay safe out there. All right.
All right, brother. You too.
All right,
You guys have a good one.
you
Bye.
too.
Bye.